Hello everyone, Freeman here. It's been 2 months since I uploaded last. Sorry about that. I've been kind of busy. Life sometimes gets in the way, and seeing as this isn't my job, I couldn't put any focus to it as much as I wanted. However, I thought, I want to get back into the seat. I want to get back into making more interesting videos, because I'm really, happy about making them. And, I thought, why not? So, here we are with another episode, and this one is very special. Because in this video, we are having another voice actor other than myself. That is J Sweet. J Sweet will be voice acting both a guardswoman and Nubby's girlfriend, quote-unquote. You'll find out as the story goes on.
Hey guys, Jay here. Before we start, I just wanted to say thank you to Freeman for reaching out and giving me the chance to collab with him on this video. It's been such a fun experience. I've only started VA and narrating fairly recently, so I've got a lot to learn. If you guys enjoyed the video, please give a like or comment and share your thoughts. So without further ado, sit back and enjoy the story.
She's a very talented voice actor, and I think you all should go and give her a follow on Twitter and on Twitch to check out what she does. She's really great. Links will be in the description. The squad is currently staring google-eyed at their interrogator, who just happens to be the most beautiful woman they have ever seen.
That's atrocious.
They have just boarded a shuttle to their next mission, which they're being informed involves purging multiple gene-stealer cults from an imperial world. Doc is stuttering out a few poorly worded questions and trying to not stare at the interrogator's chest, while Cutter has already wandered off and is playing with his chainsword.
Cutter will not look at titties. Titties are temporary. But adamantium chainsword is eternal.
Twitch and Nubby both try to run for the exit at the word Gene Stealer, but only Sarge's iron grip is holding them back. None of you go anywhere. You will stay right here.
Damn it.
Hey, you guys okay?
Yes, ma'am. Just teaching them discipline. Behind the interrogators, there are 5 professional-looking men who are eyeing the Guardsmen with dubious expressions. So no shit, there we were, heading out to fight the foes of the Imperium under command of the hottest woman within several cubic light years. Sure, we were on our way to fight with a bunch of Xenos monstrosities and mutant cultists, but our interrogator was the envy of the Inquisition agents all across the sector. Any red-blooded trooper would have given his right hand to trade places with us, except he'd need it for the lonely nights after she'd ruined every other woman for him. None of us had imagined there were even an interrogator like her. She was practically perfect. She had a dancer's grace, a charmer's smile, and the singer's voice. Everything about her was beautiful and perfect.
Digganops?
Oh, god damn it. Well, almost. To top it all off, she had experience running every part of an Inquisition operation, she was a minor psyker, and was absolutely deadly with her force sword.
Oh no, we all know that force swords are better than adamantium swords. It's fine, you fucking suck.
It was a wonder that she hadn't already become an Inquisitor. We all assumed that her boss had just wanted to keep her around for as long as possible. The rest of the team consisted of hard-bitten, multidisciplined adepts that could only really be called agents. They each had a bit of speciality, such as technology or stealth or social infiltration, but they were all highly trained operatives that could fill almost any role in a mission. On top of that, every single one of them was wrapped around our interrogator's little finger. They'd go to the Eye of Terror itself if she ordered it. They hung on her words at briefings and were constantly researching and practicing in hope of earning her praise.
To think, imagine being one of those fucking ass kissers.
I didn't even know the Emperor had angels.
Well, yeah, he's got the Astartes.
Yeah, but with tits.
What?
So it was sort of surprising that most of us didn't really like her. Well, most of us. Doc and Twitch were terrified of her. Doc got tongue-tied around most women. He could barely talk even when the interrogator was around. He would drop what he was holding, stare at anything else in the room, then either freeze completely or mutter something and try to escape. Meanwhile, Twitch had decided that anything that was beautiful was specifically designed to destroy men.
You know know how they are. They're bloody succubus, all of them, and they're gonna have me hung by my fucking foreskin, and then they're gonna suck me off all my fluids.
You will stop. One way or another.
Aye, Sarge.
He firmly believed that she was some sort of demon, or witch, or xenos, or mechanical construct. His theory varied from day to day.
Digger knob.
You too.
Sarge and Cutter were vaguely distrustful of her. Sarge had completely justified distrusting of authority. None of the squad's previous interrogators had impressed him with their strategic ability, and his guard superiors had been even worse. On top of this, while she was easier on the eyes than any of his former bosses, Sarge automatically assumed that any superior officer that did not have at least one obvious battle wound probably spent most of their time getting Guardsmen shot instead. For his part, Cutter didn't understand what all the fuss was about. Sure, the Interrogator's force weapon was pretty cool, but there was only room in his heart for his chainsword charm. Nubby immediately fell in love, though. He followed the Interrogator around like a foul-mouthed, unhygienic, kleptomaniac puppy.
My lady?
Emperor, damn it.
Honestly, we weren't sure who to feel more sorry for. Nubby's constant attempts to impress her were absolutely pathetic. But on the other hand, she had to endure Nubby's near-constant presence. She would follow her around doing errands, offering her little gifts, and constantly telling her about the heroic exploits of Captain Nubby and his merry men. At first she encouraged this behavior, since Nubby was the only man in our squad that would give her anything more than a gestured salute. Everyone had their limits though, and Nubby's chatter, blatant thievery, and smell would wear down anyone's presence. He even started standing guard outside her quarters while she slept, which was more than anyone should ever have to bear.
Nubby, stop guarding her fucking sleeping chambers, or I'm going to personally educate you on the birds and the bees in the shower.
Look, mate, the rape I can handle, but leave out the soap.
No promises are made.
Sarge put a stop to that as a sort of peace offering. Once again, we claimed a section of cabins as our own and let Twitch fortify them. Thanks to our abysmal first impression, not to mention effect Nubby had on the rest of the team, we mostly got away with our routine of napping, personal training, and ignoring everyone else. The others seemed to think of us as disposable muscle, and they weren't going to traverse a literal minefield or argue with a heavily armed paranoid just to talk to us. Of course, we had to leave our territory to go on a few briefings with the rest of the team, but since we weren't a part of the Interrogators fan club, we weren't invited to stick around in their part of the ship. The only exception to our isolation was that every once in a while, the Interrogator would come down and make an attempt at bonding with us. She stopped trying after Twitch threw holy water at her.
Whoa, what are you doing? Oh, no.
There you go, take that, come on, be on, thought.
Twitch, you fucking retard!
No, don't touch me, no you do!
The end of all this mutual disgust, aside from making any casual conversations with Nubby unbearable, was that Nubby became more or less the liaison between our squad and the rest of the team. This meant that almost all the information about our mission went through a pathological liar who spent most of the time making eyes at the Interrogator instead of listening. Information that filtered through to us wasn't exactly encouraging. A major gene-stealer cult had been broken up several years ago by some badass inquisitor, but several splinters had already broken off and headed to other worlds. Recently, several of those splinters had been tracked down to a medium-sized Imperial world, smacked in the middle of the subsector. Oak had apparently decided that this was an excellent chance for some of the inquisitive wannabes to prove themselves, so 3 teams were sent out to try and purge these infestations, without massacring entire Imperial cities. A few regiments of Guard would be stopping by in a few months, so if the teams failed to solve things by then, a more general purge would be performed by the boys in green. Our 3 team forces was given the rough location of no less than 6 gene-stealer infestations, and told to go down and pinpoint each cult, take out its leadership, and then send the locals to mop up the rest. Everyone would enter the system discreetly, so as to not spook the cultists, as each interrogator was given a trainee rosette to beat the local authorities over the head with. Each team was assigned 2 infestations and told to help the others when they finished, or if the other teams called for help. Finally, if shit went south, they were to try and convince the PDF to do a general purge. Our interrogator and the agent spent the trip going through what info we had about the planet and the cultists. The general theory was to find the public face of the cultists, perform some sort of daring kidnapping operation, rip the location of the rest of the cult from their minds or databases, then plan a surgical strike with loyal elements of the PDF. We all eagerly awaited the second plan that would be performed after the attempt to capture a psychotic mutant Xenos cultist surrounded by guards went ploin-shaped. We touched down in a fair-sized city and immediately set up base in a pretty ritzy house. Apparently the Inquisition wasn't skimping on this mission. The agents all started going out on their little fact-finding missions, infiltrating political groups, examining real estate records, hacking databases, and in the Interrogator's case, attending extravagant parties. We would not be invited to any of these missions on the grounds that we were so unstealthy that just being in the same general area would blow their cover. The lack of invitation didn't stop Nubby from attending these parties, though. One can only imagine the disgust on the Interrogator's face when he kept showing up mid-party in clothes he had mugged off servants or drunk knobs. Since we didn't have anything better to do, we mostly lounged around. Ate bad fast food, kept the vehicles in order, and generally transformed a beautiful townhouse into an Imperial Guard firebase. We had been in transit for several weeks, and now we had been told to stay at base, while the rest of the team did the investigating.
Now wait a minute, why can't we be in stealth missions? What reason do they have for that?
Stealth missions are fucking pizdead. It is better to charge enemy head-on.
Yeah, I think I know why.
While any guardsman appreciates downtime, Sarge wasn't a fan of troopers sitting around with nothing to do. So he stepped up the schedule of our drills and we all helped Twitch fortify the place. This eventually got us in trouble with the Interrogator, since apparently surrounding a house with razor wire counts as breaking cover, even if you cover it up with decorative shrubbery.
Women, am I right, Doc?
Please don't drag me there.
Our relationship with the rest of the team was definitively getting a bit strained. Carter got yelled at for doing sword drills in the middle of the night. Apparently, some of the agents had trouble sleeping when someone was revving a chainsword and screaming obscenities at training servitors.
You know I can't hear you capitalist swine.
They were also unappreciative of Sarge holding 5 a.m. PT in the backyard, and Doc's insistence that everyone submit to a thorough physical. The real problems, unsurprisingly, were Twitch and Nubby, though. Of course, Twitch was doing his usual thing, but unlike our previous teams, the agents had no appreciation for properly secured perimeter. After an agent ignored the poster directions and had to be rescued from a depressing landmine, there was a big fight between Twitch and the Interrogator. His perfectly valid points about perimeter security, posted instructions, and the relative safety of mechanical dual-action mines compared to motion-activated ones were dismissed. In the end, he had to remove all booby traps outside the squad's quarters, even the non-lethal ones.
She's the only booby trap I'd like to have removed.
To top everything off, Nubby had ground the entire team's nerves down to the bone. His constant petty theft, chatter, poor hygiene were bad enough, but he was practically stalking the Interrogator at this point. His very presence offended the agents, and his behavior drove them all into a simmering rage. Only his fictitious rank of captain and supposed command of our squad kept them from killing him or banning him from their briefings. All in all, it was a relief for everyone when they finally identified the front of the local cult and their primary roles in the local government.
Are you ready, soldiers?
The plan our interrogator came up with was a beautifully choreographed series of misdirections and lightning strikes. There were cunning disguises, perfectly placed bribes, subtle pieces of blackmail, nearly impossible feats of stealth and speed, and in the middle of all of it would be our interrogator, acting as the maestro. Every agent would work in perfect sync to draw in the targets, subdue them, and then return them with their memories modified. and the cult none the wiser. Our squad would stay in the van and do absolutely fucking nothing to screw things up.
Yeah, I'm starting to think that this girl doesn't like us.
You lot maybe not, but me, I know she loves.
Being a compulsive liar doesn't mean you're good at it, Nubby.
An extravagant party was organized by the Interrogator, and every one of the targets received an invitation they couldn't possibly refuse. A venue was chosen, disguises were perfected, traps were set, and a little out-of-the-way room was filled with several sinister pieces of equipment and a very nervous Doc.
Oh wait, what the fuck? Why am I here?
Doc was the only one allowed to even enter the building during the operation, and that was because no one else was qualified to handle anesthesia. Mind you, Doc wasn't really qualified either. His past experiences with sedation primarily consisted of sticking unhappy people with the God-issue one-use morphine amps. The plan called for a lot of really complex stuff that more or less boiled down to grab a target, take them to a little room, drug them, do psycho stuff to them, dump them back to the party with a gap in their memory, and repeat. Cynics that we were, we expected this to fail horribly. Our squad sat in the van armed to the teeth, listening to the comms and just waiting for the screaming to start. It was a bit of a letdown when things went off without a hitch. The social agents socialized, the stealthy agents stealthed, the psycho agents psyched, and one after another, the targets were brought into Doc's little room where he kept them sealed while our interrogator and assistant rooted around in their deformed brains. The closest thing to a problem was when Doc found out that a gene stealer hybrid is rather resistant to most tranquilizers, but quintupling the dosage solved that problem. In a remarkably short amount of time, we had all the information we needed on the local cult, and the victims had no idea that anything happened. We were absolutely floored. Seriously, the mission had taken less than an hour from the word go. Most of the night was taken up with going through motions of the party, while our squad sat in the van like a bunch of naughty children. It was the most successfully inquisitorial op we had seen, and Nubby gave us no end of shit about doubting his girlfriend.
See, she made it, innit? I told you there was reason to trust my lady.
Since when did you become such a fedora-wearing faggot about all of this?
The day I found out that goddesses exists.
Permission to kick his ass of a heresy, Sarge.
Granted.
And don't come back until you've learned some manners! I've always wanted to say that.
He was so goddamn insufferable that we eventually kicked him out of the van and told him to go stalk the Interrogator or something for the rest of the night. The data gained from the party was used to create a detailed list of targets for surgical strikes by the local authorities. The list was packaged with several strategic suggestions and dire warnings about consequences of failure, then sealed by the Interrogator and handed off to a few powerful local officials who were believed to be trustworthy. We got to come along and watch the package be delivered. The snooty bastards nearly shat themselves when they were shown the Interrogator's rosette. The Interrogator sealed the packages and instructed the locals to only open them if ordered to do so by someone with an inquisitorial rosette. That done, we packed all up, sent a coded message to the other teams informing them of our success, and headed off to the next cult location. A less stalwart bunch of guardsmen would have started to doubt their cynical view of the world, but we had earned every bit of that cynicism with blood, sweat, and tears. Like hell we were going to give it up for someone as trifling as a single successful mission. We comforted ourselves with the thought that nothing that's perfect could happen twice. We told ourselves that the next op was practically guaranteed that we'd have a colossal fuck-up in it, even if we have to supply it ourselves. Boy, were we right. We moved to another of the major cities on the planet, and once again we set up shop in an incredibly posh house. We went about guardifying it while the rest of the team did their intel gathering thing. But we were much more restrained this time. The successes of the previous mission had been humbling. The team had put up with our shit and performed like professionals, saying the least we could do was to be civil. That's not to say we were any more fond of the Interrogator or any less sure of the impending disaster. We just didn't see the point of deliberately pissing the rest of the team off while they worked. Even though we were acting more restrained, our paranoia had been ratcheted up several levels by the success. It was just a more sort of paranoia. Something was inevitably going to go wrong. But no one would ever listen to us, or let us take perfectly reasonable security measures. So we stepped up our makeshift barracks and prepared for all the complex plans to fall apart and dump everything in our laps. Our mood was not improved by Nubby periodically coming in and rambling about his lady love.
She's a lady and you will address her as...
Shut the fuck up, Nubby, I'm reading a story. Anyway, before long the intel was gathered. The targets were identified and another magnificent party was scheduled by the Interrogator. Once again, the Interrogator and her agents put up another incredibly complex plan, which would pull one target after another into the little interrogation room manned by Doc. There were little differences here and there, but it really was the same plan as last time, right down to us grumpy guardsmen sitting in the van where we couldn't get into trouble.
At least we're not forced to deal with Nubby.
I can hear you from outside.
Shut up, Suka!
We paid careful attention to the briefing this time, quietly tracking all the ways things could go wrong. When it was over, we retreated to our quarters and started making our own contingencies. We had plans for stopping escaping targets, we had plans for intercepting cultists hunting our team, we had plans for holding off reinforcements. Hell, we even had plans for it if the Interrogator and the Psyker agents both became simultaneously turned into demon hosts. Sure, all of these solutions were more or less apply last fire and explosives until it stops being a problem, but we did have them.
Alright everyone, time to get the show on the road.
Of course, my lady.
Shut the fuck up. Absolute mumbling, mate.
Alright, get your fucking shit together and get the fuck out of here.
Oh, yes, my lady.
The team was amped up and ready for another perfect op. Well, at least Nubby and the Interrogator. But after several days of mostly speculating about what could go wrong, our squad had general attitudes of condemned prisoners. We weren't sure what was worse. If even a tenth of our paranoid worries came true, we were all going to die horribly. But even if that went perfectly, again, we'd probably have to kill ourselves. Or join the Interrogator fan club with Nubby. Most of us considered death to be the better option. On the night of the party, our squad piled into the van with so much military hardware that we clinked when we walked. We had las guns and melee weapons, ammo and med packs, several different types of grenades, and more det packs than even Twitch thought we needed. When a guardsman feels a sense of doom in the air, munitions are his security blanket. Doc was sent off to his little room with a batch of super heavy tranquilizers he had prepped after the slight difficulty last time. He was going to be alone in this. We gave him another backup guard issue combead, in direct violation of the Interrogator's orders. Twitch snuck him a few toys. That is to say, Doc was given enough directional mines to blow up anyone coming through the front door to chunk his salsa while simultaneously opening an escape route to the back. We sat in the van, jittering and waiting for either the impending disaster or the most embarrassing moment of our lives. This op would make us, break us, or quite possibly kill us. All we could do was to listen to the comms and wait to see which. You should have seen the look on Sarge's face when the elevator took the stealthy agent by surprise when it suddenly reversed direction and smashed him into the top of the shaft. Oh, fucking finally. Grinning like schoolboys, we started peeling out of the van even before the agent's scream was cut short by the inevitable splat. As we sprinted for the building, we all felt a deep sense of satisfaction as two of the agents reported they were being followed, and Sarge almost started laughing when the Interrogator's orders to abort was interrupted by a gurgling scream and comms going down.
Lads, this is Doc. I'd like some assistance, please. Could that be possible? Twitch?
Oh, sorry. We're coming for you, boy, don't you worry.
Can I just ever do something I'm fucking good at?
Yeah, Twitch actually did start laughing when Doc reported hostilities approaching his position, and his intention to blow the mines when the rendezvous with us in the ballroom. We hit the front door right as Doc's mines went off. As the explosion shook the building, we kicked in the door, butt-stuck the Remta cop standing guard, and headed for firing positions. Nubby and Twitch sprinted to the balconies to lay down covering fire, while Sergeant Cutter started forcing a path through the crowd. It was complete pandemonium in the ballroom. The crowd was panicking, gunfire was coming from several directions, and the hostiles were almost identical to the rest of the partygoers. One agent was already down, another was pinned behind some pillars. As we got into position, we saw the Interrogator retreat out a side door, with 3 cultists in pursuit. Nubby and Twitch made quick work of the cultists they could see, and started sweeping the crowd for hostiles, and the original targets. Sarge and Cutter finally made it through the crowd to the surviving agent, where they found several cultists pretending to be guests and waiting for a clear shot. Cutter hit them in the rear and started making cultist hamburgers while Twitch and Nubby shot anyone who didn't run from the madman with a sword. Sarge took his chance and ran to grab a pinned agent before the hostiles showed up. The ground team was pulling back towards the front doors when the rescued agent spotted one of the targets in the dwindling crowd and broke away from the group.
Over there, he's running. Catch him! Catch him!
God Emperor fucking damn it. Cutter, you with me?
Done!
Swearing under their breaths, Sergeant Cutter ran after the agent as he closed down on a spectacularly fat man. The panic in the room covered the sound of the agent's approach and managed to land a decent hit with his stunner. But the fat man wasn't completely incapacitated. With stalling speed, he popped back onto his feet, locked eyes with the agent, and started to draw a weapon. Before he could kill the paralyzed agent, Cutter hit him like a truck and started repeatedly clubbing him over the head with the flat of his chainsword. Once the fat man stopped moving, Sarge pulled Cutter off and the whole group headed for the exit, dragging the fat man behind them. Twitch saw the cultists follow-up assassins enter the room before anyone else and immediately nailed 2 of them, prompting the rest to dive into cover. Thinking fast, Sarge took cover behind the wobbling folds of the incapacitated target and dragged Cutter and the agent down with him. They hunkered down behind the makeshift barricade and hoped to the Emperor that 200 kilos of blubber would stop small arms fire. It turned out that enough fat is just as good as a bunch of sandbags, and luckily, the cultists didn't have anything heavier than handguns. Twitch and Nubby picked up most of the cultists, and the last few decided to stick in cover and wait for reinforcements. Sarge was considering releasing Cutter and launch a flanking attack on them, when Doc poked his head through the door behind the cultists.
Shit! Doc, take cover!
Oh. Doc ducked out of the room, and we all did our best to keep attention off of him for a few seconds. Before long, he stepped out of the door, calmly walked up to a pair of cultists and tranked them while behind him. The last missing agent walked in and headshotted the final cultist. The room was empty, except for us now. Twitch and Nubby dropped down from the balcony, and everyone gathered around to plan the next move. The fat man was thoroughly dead. Turns out that no amount of body mass will let you live through being a mass meat shield against half a dozen handguns. To our surprise, the 2 cultists that Doc had so thoroughly tranquilized were dead too. Apparently, they weren't as gene-stealery as the previous targets had been, and the quintuple strength trank instantly killed them. In fact, a quick examination didn't turn up anything gene-stealery about them. We had vague feelings that this was important, but since it wouldn't help us survive the current shitstorm, we flied it away for later. Since we were the ones who would work in comms, Sarge took operational command. The 2 surviving agents were told to fall in behind us, and we'd make our way out of the building. Theoretically, we would have tried to find the rest of the team first, but we knew one agent was dead, and judging by the comm traffic, the others were too. Nubby and the surviving agents argued for finding the Interrogator, but Sarge decided she was a big girl who could handle herself. So we all headed back to the base instead. We carefully made our way to the front door and got ready for the complete exposed sprint to the van. Right as Sarge was about to give us the order to run, the van exploded in a fireball that took out every other vehicle in the lot. We all looked at Twitch, who shrugged and muttered about making sure no one tampered with it. So no shit, there we were, standing outside a building full of corpses, most of which we were responsible for. No vehicle, no form of inquisitorial identification, and the rapidly approaching sounds of sirens. Judging by the arm landed next to Doc, a bunch of cultists had tried to mess with our van and ran her full of Twitch's premier defenses. But no one shot the agents when we sent them to check the wreckage, so we assumed that none of the hostilities were left. We could have hotwired a nearby vehicle and led a copse of daring chase, But we could have the social agent to try and bluff them, or we could have slightly gone into custody and awaited rescue by the Interrogator, or we could have been tied to fight our way through an entire city's worth of cops. Instead, we decided to just walk home. The agents weren't exactly happy about this decision. None of us were disguised, they said. It was a 20-kilometer walk, they said. We were in plain sight, they said. And we were all obviously carrying weapons, they said. We ignored them, though. And as we walked, Sarge completely explained that no sane copper was going to ask a bunch of guardsmen why they were carrying their weapons with them on leave. Especially not when there was something much more important to deal with. He did acknowledge the point about it being 20 clicks back to base, though. So, after a few blocks, we found a train station and rode home with very scared-looking adamantium workers. Those of us with the proper God-issue common sense caught some much-needed rest while we traveled. The agents just sat there and worried about their precious Interrogator. The sun was almost up when we got back to base, and the agents were dead on their feet. Doc opened the front door and nearly lost a hand when the Interrogator fired several bolt runs through it, but after a bit of careful negotiation, we convinced her to let us in. She seemed surprised we were actually alive. It was a bit insulting, really. After the Interrogator put the bolt pistol down, we all filed in and Sarge gave the squad report. Doc and the agents filled in the bits we weren't there for, and they painted a pretty clear picture of the cultists' attack, our swift response, and the rescue of the agents. Sarge also made sure to mention the attempt to capture the Fat Man and lacked the gene-stealer characteristics of the cultist. But the Interrogator wasn't exactly impressed with this information. Instead, she asked some very pointed questions about why the interrogation room had been filled with explosives, why we had deployed without orders, and whose idea it was to rig the van with proximity mines. For the most part, we stood there and ignored these questions in traditional Guardsman fashion. But Twitch made a few unkind comments about the Interrogator's retreat.
I don't know about the mines, but I do seem to remember that there was some sort of figure that did run away from the situation. Although, I can't remember who it was. I can say this, though. Hips don't lie. Maybe that's a hint, but I don't know.
Which she gracefully decided to ignore. Eventually, the Interrogator got tired of yelling at us and told the whole team to pack up their gear and get into the Flier in the garage. She had decided that this part of the mission was beyond salvage and ordered an immediate purge by the PDF. We had less than an hour to get our shit together and get the hell out of there before the killing started. None of us were particularly happy about the purge order. A whole lot of civvies were just going to be killed, and the PDF grunts were going to be pretty messed up by the end of the purge. But in the end, it was the Interrogator's call to make. We didn't have any clever suggestions, and she clearly wasn't interested in listening to our half-baked plans, so we kept our mouths shut. Hell, even if we had a real idea for fixing the situation, we couldn't have stopped the purge without the Interrogator's rosette. So, feeling like our heroic rescue had been for nothing, we collected everything we could carry, got into the team's Flier, and awaited further orders. We hadn't even finished stowing up our gear when the Interrogator and 2 agents pinned into the Flier full combat gear. The agents jumped into the pilot seats and we were immediately took off while our Interrogator told us that none of the other teams had requested aid. The Interrogator explained that the other team was on its way to deal with the rest of the cultists and expected heavy resistance, so our team would make comm contact and act as reinforcements as soon as we arrived. We cracked open our supplies and started gearing up for a big fight as we flew. This time it would be straightforward battle, and we would be ready. Far below us was last fire and artillery fire that started to spread across the city. The squad was in a pretty grim mood. Thousands, if not millions, of Imperial citizens were dying below us, and it was all because our team had botched a single op. We looked back at the sense of smug satisfaction we felt when the Interrogator's plan had fallen apart, and felt a little ashamed. This wasn't just about proving ourselves right and keeping our asses safe. There were millions of lives down there. The entire squad vouched that this would not happen again, and each of us swore that we would do our damnedest to aid the other teams and complete the mission objectives. Except for Twitch, that is. Instead, the Nutter swore that he would put a stop to the Interrogator's nefarious plans to harvest his precious bodily fluids.
No, there is no way that I'll let someone touch me when I'm sleeping. Especially not someone that wants to steal my bodily fluids during No Nut November. Ow!
You're an idiot, Twitch. An absolute mongrel.
Fuck got you up so tight-assed?
Doc hit Twitch and told him to stop plot to kill our superior officer unless Sarge told him so. We were all locked, loaded, and ready for action when we entered the other team's territory, and the Interrogator made contact. She reported that the second team was pinned down in a building by several well-armed cultists, and hostile reinforcements were probably on the way. We would land on a nearby roof, get into position, and take out attackers and any other cultists, while the team inside finished their mission. The agents would stay in the Flier and give air support. As soon as the Flier touched down, we fanned out across the edge of the roof and started setting up one hell of a sneak attack. The targets below us were obviously professionals. They were spread out across several pieces of cover, had military-grade weaponry, and were maintaining fire discipline. Since these guys were head and shoulders above the cultists we had fought earlier, Sarge ordered us to hold fire and pick our targets for a massive opening salvo. Before any of us could finish setting up our shots, though, the Interrogator ran to the edge of the roof and started pouring bolt fire into the cultists below.
Take this, you filthy Xenos!
They responded instantly, every one of them turning towards the roof and laying down suppressive fire. We all immediately hit the deck, leaving the Interrogator as the only clear target. She threw up a force field, but she wasn't a powerful offensive psyker, and after a few seconds she collapsed with a scream. And when Nubby saw this, he burst out of cover and started hosing last fire back at the cultists with no regret for his personal safety. Doc barely managed to pull him to the ground before they return fire could kill him. Sarge took stock of the situation, decided it was salvageable and assumed to operational command. Figuring he needed some form of identification from when he reached the other team, he grabbed the moaning Interrogator's bolter pistol with its obvious inquisitorial marking, then ordered Twitch to take her back to the Flier. Twitch grumbled and pulled the limp Interrogator over his shoulder, then started to slowly haul her towards the Flier, complaining loudly that she wasn't even trying to walk. Sarge decided that the squad's current situation were fucked, so he gave the order to pop smokes and flashes and get new ones. While we shifted positions, Sarge started flipping through frequencies on his comm band and attempting to contact the other team and coordinate an attack. We were still waiting for the smoke to clear and the fight to resume, when Cutter spotted the cultists' reinforcements coming in from their own Flier.
Cultist Peter Razina, 12 o'clock.
We'd been ready for something like this, though. Both Sarge and Nubby had brought heavy ordnance along. Nubby got his launcher ready, and as soon as the Flier came into range, he nailed it with a flak missile. The shot wasn't perfect, and the pilot managed to crash land at the edge of the smoke screen, but Sarge raised his nade launcher and dropped several rounds into it before anyone could get out. That done with, he went back to scanning the comm channels and finally made contact with our other team. Sarge asked for a sitrep, and we all got patched in just in time to hear, "Our situation is FUBAR. We've been pinned down by several heavily armed cultists, and someone just fragged our Interrogator's Flier." Oops. That was a little embarrassing, but these sort of things happen in combat, and we were still in the middle of a fight. Sarge told them that we had eyes on the cultists and that we would deal with things while the other team sat tight. As the smoke cleared, he started popping nades into every piece of heavy cover he could see, while the rest of us waited for him to flush out the targets. A few seconds later, the other team voxed back and told us to bloody hurry! They are dropping nades on our heads right here! Double oops. This screw-up was actually too big to be entirely our fault. In fact, there was no way that a screw-up this big could be accidental. After all, the Interrogator had been in comm contact with the other team the whole time, and had been the first one to open fire. We all turned our heads towards Twitch and the Interrogator, and watched in horror as she sprang upright with Twitch's last pistol in her hand.
Jackass, piece of shit.
Twitch reacted with lightning speed and threw himself backwards, but before he hit the ground, she drew a bead on his head. She met his eyes, and then, with the most beautiful smile in the entire galaxy, she pulled the trigger.
Sorry, love. That thing wasn't built for you.
There was an ominous hum when the trigger was pressed. The smile faded, and a second later the pistol's power cell went off like a small grenade, taking the bitch's hand with it. It really shouldn't have been a surprise to any of us that Twitch had booby-trapped his weapon. He'd regularly told us to never ever touch any of his stuff without asking first. It surprised us anyway though, and we all stared at the explosion like a bunch of dumb recruits. This meant that every single one of us was dazzled by the explosion, which blew Twitch and the Interrogator in opposite directions. As most of us tried to blink the spots from our vision, Cutter charged the downed Interrogator with swearing words at the top of his lungs.
I told you titties were not eternal, sucker!
Cutter was damn fast, but he had to cover a lot of distance and the Interrogator was getting back on her feet in seconds. She sprinted for the Flier. One of the agents poked his head out the door to see what the hell was going on. What he saw was a badly wounded Interrogator running for safety, while Twitch blindly sprayed last fire and Cutter bore down on her with revving his chainsaw and screaming for blood. So, in retrospect, his decision to draw his sidearm and give her some covering fire was pretty reasonable. Reasonable or not, it still screwed us though. Cutter had to start dodging shots and only caught up to the Interrogator as she was boarding the Flier. Cutter made a good attempt at removing the Interrogator's pretty head, but it was forced to dodge the last second by the agent. The Interrogator's counterstroke nearly impaled Cutter, but he fell back and only took a minor stab wound from the foresword. This gave the agent enough time to slam the door shut, and the Flier started to take off as Cutter futilely hacked at the door with his chainsaw.
Open up, motherfucker, nyeh!
The moment the Interrogator broke off the Flier, Sarge started to try and raise the agents from the comm, but to his absolute disgust, he found that the Interrogator had locked the whole squad out of the team's network. So with no way to reach our side of the story across, we just stood there and watched the Flier take off. Our paralysis lasted until we realized that it was coming around for a strafing run. It didn't surprise any of us that the agents had sided with their precious little Interrogator. Later we might try to turn them around, but right now they were sheltering our enemy and trying to kill us. We all scattered and managed to avoid the salvo that came in from the Nose's gun. Thinking fast, Doc grabbed the missile launcher from the stunned Nubby and loaded our backup flak round. Doc wasn't exactly a pro at using the heavy weapon, but it was pretty near miss and he definitively got a chunk of the Flier. Sarge supplemented this with some airburst grenades from his launcher, and between the two of them, we convinced the Flier that we weren't worth the trouble. It turned tail and limped away into the distance, as we all stood there and tried to figure out just what the hell had happened.
I knew it! She would try to steal my fucking fluids, and she's gonna offer it to the fucking Super Satan!
I don't care, Twitch! Our main concern right now is not to chase her. Understand first what the fuck just happened, and then tell me what we're gonna do, if you are saying that you understand so goddamn well what the fuck just happened. Cause I can tell you one thing, I don't have a goddamn clue. Neither do you. We were brought back to reality by the sound of fighting from the street below. The cultists in the building were laying heavy fire onto the poor buggers that we had done our level best to team kill. Doc went to see the slightly crispy Twitch and slightly stabbed Cutter, while Sergeant Nubby pumped the rest of the squad's grenade and missile launcher rounds into the building. This went a long way towards convincing the other team that our previous attacks had all been misunderstanding. The barrage of explosions were pretty much leveling the building, and none of the surviving cultists decided to stay and fight. Neither our squad or the team below was in position to give chase, so we all withdrew and tried our best to sort things out from the comm.
Hey, you guys okay?
Yeah, we're fine. Rendezvous up with us on the streets. We got one hell of a story to tell. We explained the situation as best as we could, and, mostly thanks to the former Guardswoman on their team, we eventually convinced them that all of this was the Interrogator's fault. The problem was that we didn't really have any idea what to do about it. We were just a bunch of grunts, and the other team was down to a Guardswoman, a Psyker, an Arbeit, and a pair of badly wounded clerics. Apparently the Interrogator and all of their team's nerds had been in the Flier that Sarge and Nubby had blown to pieces. We blamed that one on the agents in the Flier when they asked who shot it down. None of us had any great ideas about how to track down the Interrogator, so we decided to fall back to the other team's safe house and see if we could race the third team's Interrogator. We hotwired their vans and headed for their base. Doc did his best to fix up the 2 wounded clerics. Neither of them was going to be back in fight anytime soon, though. On the brighter side, Twitch had lost his eyebrows and needed a new pair of pants, but was otherwise fine. And Carter hadn't even noticed the shallow stab wound he took, as he was far more concerned about the teeth on his chainsaw that he had lost when he tried to cut open the Flier.
I did not cry. I just miss Babushka.
When we got to the safe house, we all went about reloading and rearming ourselves, while Sarge and the Guardswoman tried to contact the third team. Luckily, there was a backup Flier packed in the safe house, so we started moving everything we might need in case the third Interrogator wanted to join in. After only a few minutes of this, we started to hear the distinctive sounds of heavy artillery and las fire in the distance. We quickly realized that our Interrogator had called in another purge for Emperor knows what reason. Being inside an inexorably shrinking military cordon is bad, so it was time to get the hell out of Dodge. We loaded up the wounded and the last of the supplies we could carry, and then the Arbeit got us in the air while Sarge and the Guardswoman tried to use their Flier's Vox to reach the local authorities. We were mildly successful in our attempts to convince the PDF to stop the purge. The orders had been given by someone with a genuine inquisitorial rosette, and Emperor help the man, he who defies the Inquisition. Sarge failed miserably when he tried to explain that we were the Inquisition, as without the rosette to prove it, no one would believe him. We considered going back to look for the second team's rosette, but since the Interrogator had been wearing it when we blew him to pieces, that idea was quickly abandoned. Eventually the PDF must have reported our attempts to stop the purge to the Interrogator, because they suddenly got very interested in where we were voxing them from. We quickly deactivated our vox, in case they could trace it, and watched the fireworks below us whilst we made our way towards the third team's last known position. We spent a lot of time talking during the flight. None of this shit made any sense to us, and we had no idea what to do about it. Initially we asked Twitch what the Interrogator's plan was, since he had been sure she was planning to kill us the entire time. But he quickly developed into theories about precious bodily fluids. Nubby wasn't of any help either. He kept insisting that this was some sort of misunderstanding and that the Interrogator was the sweetest girl who would never hurt a fly. We weren't going to get anything useful out of them, so we just put our heads together with the rest of the team and tried to figure shit out. Looking back at it, it was sort of weird that the cultists at the party hadn't been gene-stealery or cared about shooting the fat man, so we decided that they must have been the Interrogator's friends, and the plan had been to wipe out the whole team. But if that was her main goal, though, she could have killed us in far simpler ways, so we figured that it was supposed to look like an accident. We didn't really see the point, though. If she wanted to purge, she could have just provided a nice justification, but she hadn't ordered a general purge on the first cult. Maybe she wanted to prepare a mass murder and still pass her Inquisitor test or something.
She's just trying to steal our fucking fluids!
Anyway, it was definitively her plan to get us into a fight with the other team, and presumably have us wipe each other out. We didn't really see the reason for that either, but maybe she just wanted to kill the team, and figured she'd take out 2 birds in 1 stone. It made a stupid sort of sense if she was low on cultist manpower and afraid of people trying to stop her purges. Her reason for the purges was still a mystery, though. All we knew was that this wasn't working with the gene stealers, since they weren't going to live through the purges either. In the end, we just decided that she was an utter bitch, and we tried to catch some sleep before the flight would end. We woke up to the sound of more artillery fire. We were over the city where the last team was supposed to be working, and we all recognized the shitstorm below us. The damned bitch had ordered another purge. We were pretty sure she couldn't have ordered this one without either enlisting or killing the third Interrogator, but it didn't hurt to check. We turned the Vox back on and called the third team. To our surprise, not only were they alive, but we actually got them on the first try. Sarge immediately explained that our Interrogator had gone nuts, tried to kill us and the other team, and was running around ordering mass purges for generic evil reasons. That is utter ludicrous, and you know damn well that what you're doing is out of your line, Guardsmen. Oh no, not him too. Unfortunately, the bitch had their interrogator under her thumb too. So the only response we got was an order to surrender to the Inquisition and seek mercy for our sins. That was bullshit, so we turned off the Vox and started to debate the merits of catching a ride back to Oak's ship, hanging out at some tropical island until this all blew over, or even getting a job on a rogue trader. Our boss was an evil bitch who got off on ordering mass purges. The nearest other's official was totally whipped by the said evil bitch. Several major cities were being needlessly genocided, and no one on this damned planet would listen to us unless we had on one of their rosettes. Everything was a horrible bloody mess, and it shouldn't have been our job to sort it out. Our plans for desertion came to a sudden halt when the psyche from the second team started freaking out. We hadn't known the psyche for very long, but it didn't seem like the time to randomly start screaming. So while Doc saw to him, we all started looking out the windows and checking the sensors for anything warpy going on. The problem quickly became apparent. A pair of massing glowing lines shot from different directions across the ground under us. A second later, this was followed by dozens of smaller lines which formed eldritch symbols all across the city below. But it didn't take a bloody savant to see that this was some serious warp shit, or that the glowing lines were extending towards the other two cities that the Interrogator had ordered purged. Even though none of us were sure about what was going on here, everyone was pretty sure that this was all her fault. The situation was going to shit at incredible speed. The only thing we could think of was to try and get our hands on one or two of the remaining rosettes and use it to tell everyone to stop being retarded. So we stayed on course for the third team's base and hoped that both interrogators would still be there. While we flew in, everyone geared up for a fight. We weren't going to ask nicely to appeal to reason, then be really surprised when they all sided with the hot chick over a bunch of scruffy guardsmen. We were going to hit them hard and let the Emperor sort them out. After this shit was over, we could argue with any survivors, whilst Doc tried to reattach their limbs. We sold the remnants of the second team on our plan. The guardswoman and the whimpering psyche would come with us, whilst the Arbeit handled the Flier and kept an eye on the two wounded clerics still chilling in the back. The plan was pretty simple. Bust in, head for the two interrogators, kill or subdue anyone in the way, and hopefully grab one of those damned rosettes intact. It was going to be a tight and brutal fight. Several trained hostiles, a lot of walls varying thickness, and an enemy who knew the terrain better than us. Several consequences for failure. And to top it off, it looked like the safe house was located halfway up a damned tower. Not only would it be a rough flight, we also had to figure out a way to get inside without running into an ambush. Good thing we had a Flier. Now, this Flier didn't have any weapons, so we couldn't really use it for air support. It did have a nice amount of armor though, and the third team's safe house had some nice big windows. This is your captain speaking. We're going for a nice flight. Be ready for impact.
Whoa, what are you doing? Oh, no!
Another happy landing.
Wait, who's he?
I know. Who invited him?
A few minutes later, we finally opened the Flier's doors and started digging our way out of the pile of safety glass, wall fragments, and destroyed furniture we had created with our landing.
Oh, we live. Who would have thought? Good job, guys.
Don't cry for celebration yet. We've got company. All things considered, it was incredibly lucky that we were the first ones to get out of the wreckage. As we stumbled out of the crippled Flier, we saw several hostiles struggling to get free, and we took the chance to hit them with some of Doc's, now normal strength, tranks. We congratulated ourselves on successfully breaching the perimeter without even killing any other inquisitorial agents. Probably. Truly, we were the pinnacle of professionalism. After finishing patting ourselves on the back over our dynamic entry, we formed up and started making our way deeper into the safe house. We knew how to clear a building and had plenty of flash grenades, so we moved out from room to room at a steady pace, flashing, sweeping, and securing. The first few rooms were all empty, But before long, we ran into a pair of adepts who practically shat themselves when we flashed them. We clubbed them down, secured their hands and feet, and asked them a few questions about where exactly everyone was. The adepts had actually been very helpful. They made a few feeble attempts to defy us, but after Sarge hauled them both to a window and pointing out the glowy shit, both adepts came around to our way of thinking. They also found Cutter's explanation of how the 3 strikes rule works with a chainsword very persuasively.
Now you have 2 options. You can either say where everyone is, or I can talk to Sasha. And when she's done with you, she'll make your ass prolapse to the point where it looks like shishlik.
They pointed us towards a set of rooms that belonged to the 3rd team's interrogator, and confirmed that our former interrogator was in there with him. We taped them to the wall and made our way towards the interrogators. There were going to be a reckoning. There are 2 good ways to clear a hostile building. You either want to hit them hard and fast, with several teams working together to take out the enemy before they concentrate their forces. Or you want to move in stealthily and take a small group of enemies while avoiding major ones. Unfortunately, the size of our team and our arrival via crashing Flier meant that these options weren't really possible. We were stuck with the sort of almost okay option of moving carefully and praying to the Emperor that we'd spot the inevitable ambush before it sprung. We didn't. We methodically worked our way towards the room where the interrogators were supposed to be. We had it down to a science. Every room went the same. Check the door, get into position, flash, storm, realize the room was empty, and move on to the next door. The lack of opposition was unsettling, and we were all on pins and needles when we got a door that was sturdier than any of the others we'd seen. If the adepts had been telling the truth, both the interrogators were inside.
Alright, here must be. Twitch, get on the door. We need that thing unlocked. Just make sure there are no traps. I don't want no surprises this time.
On it.
We got into position and readied our weapons, while Twitch checked the door for traps and quietly unlocked it. Sarge got a firm grip on the handle, cooked a flash, and cracked the door open, tossing it through. Before he even started to close the door, the grenade bounced off something midair and sailed right back through. Sarge managed to get an "oh shit!" before the flash went off about 8 inches from his face. Sarge's shout triggered the bone-deep reflexes that all Guardsmen develop, and the rest of us managed to turn away. Everyone was still dazzled and deafened, but at least we weren't completely blind. Also, in turn, meant that we had just happened to be looking right in the direction when 2 agents dropped in through the ceiling. They landed on our flanks in perfect crossfire positions, and even though we were all deafened, we could feel heavy boots pounding towards the door. Thank the Emperor that one of the agents came down next to Twitch and Cutter. The agent who came down next to Twitch and Cutter was the social one we had gone through such trouble to rescue back at the party, and he had landed and raised a pair of auto pistols. He had about a quarter of a second to look surprised before a full auto burst hit him in the chest and a chainsaw hit him in the neck. The second agent landed next to the Guardswoman and the Psyker, neither of whom had the reaction time as good as Twitch and Cutter. Before the Guardswoman managed to raise her last gun, the agent landed a brutal kick on her head, raised his autogun, and opened fire on the Psyker and Nubby. The poor bastard didn't have a chance to do anything, but his death gave Nubby the split second he needed. And with Weasley speed, Nubby got behind the collapsing Psyker and held him up like a shield while he sprayed the agent with glass fire. The Emperor was with Nubby. The Emperor was with Nubby. Several of the unaimed shots hit the agent and Doc followed up with a salvo to finish the job. The entire fight had lasted just a few seconds, and the smoke from the flash was still fading as the second agent crumbled to the ground. The Psyker was dead. The Guardswoman was groggily cursing the dead agent. A barely conscious Sarge was lying on the floor, but the rest of us were okay. We had about 2 seconds to take stock of the situation before the door burst off its hinges and landed squarely on Sarge.
Shit, come on, Sarge. Get up out of there. You gotta live.
The door was followed by a pair of heavily armed Arbeids carrying shields and shock mauls. Shields raised, they stood right on top of the door and looked really confused when they saw an entire squad of Guardsmen facing them with weapons raised. There was a brief pause while the Arbites realized that the agents were already dead, and we all stared at the feebly cursing lump being crushed under a heavy door and 300 kilos of Arbeit. Then Cutter ran in with a scream, and the fight was on. Cutter did most of the damage this time. There's just no good way to use a suppression shield to stop both last fire and a maniac with a chainsword. The Arbeit on the left made a decent attempt at it though. He held off several strikes from Cutter and shots from Twitch and Doc, while his buddy kept Nubby and the guardswoman from shooting him in the back. He couldn't keep it up though. A thrust from Cutter's sword nearly made it through, and the Arbeit parried the strike right into his buddy's back. The wounded Arbeit staggered forward and removed 100 kilos of meat and armor from Sarge's back. With a roar of rage, Sarge pushed himself upward and managed to unbalance the Arbeit that was still on top of him. We all seized the opportunity, and several volleys of last fire got past the Arbeit's shields, ending the fight. While the rest of us restrained the badly wounded Arbeit and hauled them off the way, Sarge slowly pushed himself off the floor, and with pained groans, he got on his feet under him and lifted the reinforced door.
Oh, goddamn motherfucker.
Complaining about his weight and cursing the Arbeit in general. As he did so, right as Sarge managed to get upright, his curses were interrupted. A pair of bolt rounds came through the doorway and slammed into the remnants of the door and his back.
Sarge, no!
The door took the brunt of the damage, but Sarge was thrown towards and slammed into the wall head first. This was the final straw, and Sarge slipped into unconsciousness as Doc hastily grabbed him and dragged him out of the line of fire. From inside the room, we heard the third interrogator yell at us to surrender in the name of the Holy Inquisition.
In the name of His Most Holy Emperor, you are going to surrender.
Not a fat chance in hell.
So, the rebel made their way here.
You know what? On second chance, we'll surrender. If you surrender her.
I will not obey.
So no shit, there we were. Standing outside a room containing a pair of hostile and well-armed interrogators manning a prepared position, and with no non-con to tell us what to do. Up to now, we had always looked to Sarge when things were going tough, but he was out of the count. Twitch and Nubby immediately started arguing with each other. Cutter sat on one of the wounded Arbeits and worked on dislodging a piece of armor from his chainsword. Doc got Sarge comfortable in a corner, and the guardswoman stared at us like we were a bunch of retards. Eventually, Doc got tired of the guardswoman giving him the stink eye and decided that it was his duty as the only sane member on the squad to take charge. He put down his medkit, hefted his last gun, creeped close to the doorway as safe, and potentially asked the third team's interrogator if he'd considering surrendering the bitch to us. This resulted in a brief, astonished silence, and several bolt rounds sailing through the open doorway.
Do excuse my friend Twitch. He does not know how to negotiate properly. There's no negotiation to be had. You ought to come out and surrender. Do you not know what you have done? Do you not know what she has done? She has done right by the name of the Inquisition. She knows damn well what she's doing. You think you know. You've been betrayed. I most certainly have not.
The bloody hell is he doing?
If you do not believe me, then you must see for yourself. Look out the window. Then tell me if she has done right by the Inquisition's orders.
It's true, what he's saying. See for yourself.
What the hell are you doing? Shoot him!
I will, but first I will take a look. After all, we all know already that we have done right by the No. No! What is all of this? What is all of this? Chaos runes. Carved into the earth by the destruction caused. Fueled by the blood of those who have died in the bombings. It is going to continue, and once it is done, it is going to summon up a portal, where endless legions of horrors are going to escape into our reality. This purge was chaotic all along. The Emperor was not here this day. Now that you see, do you believe?
Are you going to turn from my side, from the Holy Lord's side, for some low-trotted guardsman fuck?
Yes, and you are going to explain to me why.
Traitorous cunt!
No, you. In the name of His Holy Inquisition, I have decided that you are going into
And you fell in love with that? No, she's queen. She didn't do nothing.
Hey, I know none of us wanted this. We tried every option in the book. But now it's time for us to sort this out. The Guardsmen way. For the Emperor. Diplomacy wasn't going to work this time, though Nubby made a few attempts which only resulted in more swearing and bolt fire. Surprisingly, he still wanted to try, even though she had just killed her own ally. We wanted to try and rush her, but our former interrogator was a damn good markswoman, and none of us were keen to try and trading shots with her. Unfortunately, we discovered that the walls were too sturdily built to be destroyed. And if we did it, we would collapse the entire building. And she bounced every grenade back with her damned telekinesis. The best we could do was pop a smoke out and position ourselves, and hope it would waft towards her. We were running out of options that wouldn't result in one of us getting shot, when Doc remembered the Arbeit's shields. Two of us would charge in under the smoke cover, and then try to flank her while the rest of the squad gave suppressing fire from the door. Hopefully the shields will hold long enough to get close to her, and allow the rest of the team a chance to move forward. Cutter was an obvious choice for this, but it surprised the hell out of us when Nubby volunteered to carry the other shield. This behavior was very suspicious coming from Nubby. We reminded him that the Interrogator was a heretical super bitch, but he just wouldn't listen. He insisted that she was a nice girl who had just stuck a run-in with the wrong crowd. We pointed out that she tried to kill us all. He said that most of our superior officers had done so too. We pointed out that she had killed the other Interrogator. He said that we had been planning to do that too, so we shouldn't judge her for it. Finally, Doc pointed out that she had stabbed Cutter and would stab Nubby too if she got the chance. Nubby maintained that lots of people have stabbed Cutter.
I'm not worried. I think she likes me deep down.
We just gave up at this point and gave him the damned shield. With any luck, Cutter would get to her first and chop her head off before Nubby had a chance to be retarded. We got ready, popped the smoke, and Nubby and Cutter ran towards the opposite sides of the room. Cutter was faster by far, but right as he got close to the Interrogator, she landed a grenade at his feet while staggering him with bolt rounds. Cutter leapt backwards in time, but the blast still sent him and his shield flying across the room. Nubby took advantage of the distraction, though. We all heard a clang as he clubbed the bolt pistol out of her hands and knocked her to the ground with the shield. The rest of us started moving forward, but stopped in sheer shock when we heard the Interrogator surrender to Nubby.
I yield. I yield. Please spare me. I beg you.
She admitted that she had been forced to work against the Imperium by evil heretics who would kill her if she disobeyed. She just wanted to be safe. We cleared the smoke and watched in amazement as he reached down and helped her up, quietly telling her that we'd make sure it all worked out. Then, in a fluid movement, she drew her foresword, swung in a circle, and bolted a charge for the security door at the far end of the room, as Nubby fell to the ground screaming. Twitch and the guardswoman opened fire on her as she ran, but her damned shield held out just long enough for her to pass through the door and lock it behind her. Doc ran over to Nubby and found him lying in a full meter from his own legs. It was a bad wound, but the cut had been across his thighs, not the belly. Thinking fast, Doc put a tourniquet over both of his legs and started a blood transfusion. While he worked, he lectured Nubby about the importance of critical thinking and listening to other people's advice. Twitch, the guardswoman, and the moderately wounded Cutter walked over to the security door to see if they could get through it. To their surprise, it wasn't an escape passage. It was a panic room. A little fiddling got the comm screen working, and they were treated to the sight of a furious interrogator sitting in the middle of a small rune-covered room with a bloody sword in hand. A bit more poking let them find the transmit switch, and Twitch formally placed the interrogator under arrest and ordered her to turn over her rosette and any bodily fluid she had stolen. She burst into hysterical laughter at this. To everyone's surprise, the interrogator actually started monologuing once she had finished laughing. Her defeat by the hand of a dubiously competent guardsman had apparently unhinged her. Her brethren had spent years preparing the ritual. The blood of innocents slain by the very protectors would fuel the warp storm, which would tear this entire blah blah blah. I'm a heretical super bitch, blah 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 blah. When she started ranting about the glory of chaos, Twitch, Cutter, and the Guardswoman quickly became bored and walked away from the intercom, leaving the infuriated Interrogator shouting about being able to watch us all die to the horrors of the warp before they claimed her. While the Guardswoman went to help Doc and Cutter guarded the security door, Twitch wandered over to the headless Interrogator. He poked the dead man with his lash gun, in the official guard method of determining the icky mess of a corpse. Then grudgingly started going through the man's pockets. When the guardswoman shouted at him to stop being a pansy, Twitch found the rosette pinned in the Interrogator's high collar. Well, most of it. The top quarter of the little device was feebly sparking in the puddle of blood, spreading from the severed head. Twitch got his roll-up duct tape and went to work. By the end result didn't look very inquisitorial. Also, the data jack was full of fluids.
I knew it. I fucking knew it.
On the other side of the room, Doc was finishing the field dressings and still giving Nubby shit. The subject had finally come around to how important it had been to get an inquisitorial rosette, and how Nubby fucked all of it up. Amazingly, this got a response out of the semi-conscious Nubby.
Hey, Doc, do you remember how Sarge said I could stop footing people's pockets? Well, then I was helping her up. I started fricking about on the fancy blanchard of hers. Considering that was so important, I figured out that she was being all bossed around by those chaos and such. She'd probably, and shouldn't be, loathed keeping it. So I nicked it while she was busy cutting my legs off.
Nubby, you're an absolute idiot.
And just like that, we won. The little shit's kleptomania had saved us all. After years of telling Nubby to stop stealing people's stuff, he grabbed the one thing that really mattered. He was still an idiot, though. Doc grabbed the rosette off Nubby, tossed to the ground the guardswoman, and told her to comm the PDF as fast as possible. We had completely destroyed the third team's comm system, but the Flier's Vox was still intact. The Arbeit and the guardswoman started arguing with the PDF officers and government officials, who wrecked the cockpit. While they were trying to get abreast to the reason and stop feeding the giant sacrificial circle, seriously, it was glowing and shit, the rest of us decided that what to do about the Interrogator. She had really started freaking out when she realized the rosette was missing, but the sight of Cutter chilling outside her door with a chainsaw really had convinced her to stay inside. We either needed to kill her or capture her, and as attractive as the first option was, it would be much easier to smooth things over with Oak if we were able to turn her over. The debate ended when Sarge pinned himself up, staggered in, and ordered Twitch to wheel the panic room shut. With Sarge bossing us around, we started getting shit done again. Twitch blast-welded the room shut, Doc went to convince the PDF to stop being retarded, and Cutter started dragging all the wounded together. Sarge and Nubby just sort of hung out and basked in the sound of the Interrogator's outrage. As the purges were called off, the giant glowy runes faded away, and the Interrogator's curses attained a whole new level of venom. That venom faded after Twitch found the panic room's air intake and sealed it shut. We all sat around and watched as she slowly ran out of fresh air and passed out. Then we waited a bit longer, when Doc finally decided that she was either comatose or too hypoxic to cause trouble. We cut open the doors, dragged her out, tranked her, and left her in the Doc's capable hands. Sarge became the de facto interrogator at this point. He seconded the team and had been reduced to 2 functional members, and what remained of the third team was being restrained by a few dozen rolls of duct tape until the situation could be explained to them. A Flier was requisitioned, and Sarge took the guardswoman and Arbeit to go sort everything out with the local authorities, while everyone else stayed in the wretched tower. The situation was explained in broad terms. A cordon was to be put around all 3 cities, and surgical strikes and the sealed orders were carried out. But no more mass purges would be done by the fully certified Inquisitor ordered it. Sarge told all the brass and bigwigs to just sit tight and wait for the Guard regiment to arrive with their senior Inquisitor. They'd be able to sort out the Chaos Rune bullshit and decide whether the Genestealer cults warranted a full purge. We used the rosettes to requisition a ride from the Navy. We made sure everything was sort of stable before we left, but as far as we concerned our mission, well, Getting the interrogator back to Oak would be desirable to do as soon as possible. The guardswoman who had helped us in the last battle decided to stay with the Arbeit, the 2 wounded clerics, and the rest of the 3rd team. The local authorities needed the help of some people who knew the gene stealers and how they worked, while they waited for the Inquisitor to show up. After Sarge had requisitioned our ride home and convinced the Navy we were serious people, he handed the rosette over to her. Hopefully she would be keeping things going from here, in case any more shit would go down before help arrived. As a sort of afterthought, we formally invited her to hang out with the regiment if she ever got back to base. That done, we packed up our gear, wounded dumbass, and sedated Interrogator, and then we got the hell off planet. Sedating a person for a long period of time doesn't really work. They tend to spontaneously die or just wake up. This isn't an issue if you have a stasis pod, but that's not something you can get on most Imperial frigates, so we had to improvise a bit. Letting the Interrogator sit in a cell was an invitation to disaster. It wouldn't be a day before she convinced some swabby to let her out, so we went with the cold-hearted medical route. In this case, hand means doing most of the procedure for him, and installed a shunt in the Interrogator's spine. This more or less paralyzed her from the nose down, and combined with the psychic dampener, it kept her from causing trouble. She was kept in a private medbay next to Nubby. The Force Sword had done something nasty to Nubby's legs. It was going to take augmentic surgery to get them back, but he was remarkably cheerful about the whole thing. He spent most of the journey talking to the Interrogator and telling her stories of our adventures, keeping his spirits up and all that. He thoroughly enjoyed having someone to talk to who didn't tell him to shut up or stop lying. Doc taught the Interrogator how to communicate via blinking as a sort of experiment during the trip, but all she ever said was,
"Kill me."
Nubby thought this was needlessly grim and redoubled his effort to cheer her up. When we finally got back to Oak's spacefaring inquisitorial school, Sarge handed over a report of the squad's adventures and refused to budge until a senior interrogator confirmed that the report had been read and collected the Interrogator. Nubby was sad to see her go and hoped that she would come and visit the Inquisition. That is, after they helped her with the bad men. We were all released in our quarters on Oak's ship, except for Nubby, who spent most of the time in the medical wing to start getting fit for a pair of augmetic legs. We were finally able to relax in the company of our fellow guardsmen, but we weren't able to get into the proper spirit of R&R. Since we knew that Oak would call us up for debriefing the moment we started drinking, he didn't keep us waiting long. Thank fuck. Before the week was over, we were summoned to his office to give a full report. Sarge and Doc did their best to explain everything, while Twitch and Cutter kept their damned mouths shut. And to our surprise, Oak believed every word. He questioned a few things and asked for clarification several times, but he believed every bloody word we said. At the end of the briefing, he told us the Interrogator was being turned over to the Ordo Malice for interrogation, and we were never to speak of her again. This suited us fine, and we all started congratulating ourselves on a job well done. Then he offered Sarge the rank of Interrogator and a chance to advance to full Inquisitor. The entire squad went to bat for Sarge when he heard this. Cutter expressed his
lack of faith in Sarge's combat ability.
Twitch pointed out,
"It's lack of proper inquisitorial suspicion. I'll find out the fluids, after all."
Doc raised the question of Sarge's overall physical fitness and mental fortitude. And from his comlink, the medbay, Nubby raised the question of
Sarge's lack of ethics and history of petty theft.
None of us could condone the elevation of such a pitiful specimen to the rank of Interrogator. It would dishonor the entire Inquisition. In the face of all these perfectly valid arguments, Sarge regretfully declined Oak's offer. He just wasn't good enough to be an Interrogator, so we'd had to settle for being a simple sergeant. A very bemused Oak acquiesced to Sarge's rejection. If the man's best friends didn't think he was Interrogator material, that was the end of it. So he finished the debriefing and sent us on our way. We went and drank until we puked, and then puked until we passed out. Except for Nubby. He was stuck in medbay eating and drinking nothing but nutritiously balanced meals. Poor man. Our R&R binge lasted for quite a while, but eventually it came to an end. We geared up for our next mission, but unfortunately Nubby was still struggling with his augmetic legs. Learning to walk on artificial legs is a long and arduous process, which not everyone can master. But Nubby had faith and assured us that he'd keep at it while we went on our next mission. Luckily, there was an open post in the quartermaster's department on the ship. It would be the perfect job for him while he got his feet under him, as it were. We left the medbay, and after a discussion with heavy hearts, none of us had exactly liked Nubby, but we couldn't imagine deploying without him. Where the hell would we go and get our ammo from? He always just seemed to have fresh packs for us. Wonder why. As we got back to our barracks, we were greeted by a familiar voice. Sitting in the middle of the room was the Robert, complete with a shiny augmentic arm with Alfred at his back. He was chatting with Crisp, one of those few surviving flamer experts in the regiment, and seemed to be enjoying himself immensely. In a jolly voice, he invited us over and told us he wanted some help with a little trip down to the colonies to sort out a spot of theological trouble. According to him, it was positively benighted down there, not a single illuminated thinker on the whole planet. No one to point them towards the Emperor's light. You call in the case of dark heresy, what? Well, we gathered up our kits and followed him out. After all, we knew there were worse interrogators out there. And there you go, everyone. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the All Guardsmen Party. See, I was planning to say thank you so much for 5,000 subs, but over the course of a week, we have gotten even more than that. And soon, very soon, we are reaching up to 8,000. So I guess it wouldn't be too much of a stretch to say thank you all so much for 8,000 subscribers. You continue to share the channel around, and you continue to watch my videos, which makes me very, very happy. And I'd like to give some departing words as well, from our voice actress.
Well, that was quite a ride. I hope you guys had fun. If you would like to support or follow my journey, you can find me in the links below. P.S. My social medias are under the same name, so hit me up on Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat. Oh, and I'm always open to opportunities, big or small. Don't forget to support Freeman's channel, of course, because hello, this guy's amazing. Share your favorite moments and controversial questions on the comment below, because, you know, those are always fun. Thanks again for watching. See you guys on the next adventure.
Couldn't have put it better myself. Alright, everyone. Keep sharing, keep liking, keep subscribing. It all works. Cheerios.